It's time to cook with Susan Beck. Today we're going to make some garlic Parmesan breadsticks. I love to make bread, and I've made quite a bit of it with COVID and being home more. It's a great thing to do if you have a Saturday where you're not going anywhere, because it does take a little bit of time as you wait for your dough to rise 2 different times. So let's take a look at the simple ingredients we need to make the bread dough. Not much is required to make a bread dough. We're going to use a half a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of sugar, and a tablespoon of instant yeast. I have 4 cups of flour measured out, and I have some water that we want between about 105 and 115 degrees. Just want some warm water to activate the yeast. I will use my stand mixer, but you could always use a dough hook. Here's a close-up of a Danish dough hook, a wooden spoon, and put it in a mixing bowl and do it by hand. And we will be topping this with some butter, parsley, garlic, and Parmesan cheese when they come out of the oven at the end of their baking time. I want to talk a little bit about the instant yeast. You know, I used to struggle with baking breads and things that needed yeast that half the time they just never rose well, and I was using those packets of just regular yeast. And then I came across this product called instant yeast, and it comes in a bag like this. You do get a lot of it, although maybe you have a friend you could split the bag with. And it's all kind of nice and boxy, and I just cut it open, and I store mine in just one of my Tupperware containers. I've got a glass one, plastic would be just fine, and it will last for a couple of years actually in here. This one here, I've had this one since summer, and it's dated until February 11th, 2020. So sometimes those little packets I didn't think lasted quite as long anyway. I just close the lid on it, and I do store it in the back of my refrigerator. I just put it on the bottom shelf, way in the back, out of everybody's way where nobody really notices it, but I do think keeping it refrigerated also helps to extend the life. And I am not kidding when I say that since I switched to this instant yeast, I have never had a yeast product fail to rise. So let's get started today. Into my stand mixer, I am going to put half of my flour, so of roughly the 2 cups, and I am going to put into there my tablespoon of instant yeast, my tablespoon of sugar. Sugar helps to activate the yeast, so does the warm water. Salt, you'll really notice if you leave the salt out of your bread dough. And I'm just going to mix those together so that they're incorporated. And then I'm going to add my warm water to this. And while I do that, I'm going to raise this up and, plug it in first. It looks like it didn't want to come on, but I also have another problem. I don't have my dough hook in yet. And as I said, you know, feel free to just stir it with a wooden spoon, or these are great because the dough doesn't get all caught on it and stuck to it. Better than a regular whisk for this kind of project. All right, so on goes my dough hook. One of the reasons I wanted one of these nice mixers was for making bread. I am going to add my water. Again, my water is between 105 and 115 degrees. I don't want it too hot or it's hard on that yeast. I do use a thermometer to test that, although once you get used to your microwave, you can probably judge it by how many minutes you have. All right, I'm going to slowly add in the rest of the flour. We don't really want to use more than 4 cups. If you keep adding a lot of flour, you will not get soft breadsticks. They kind of become a little more dense and hard. So this should be pretty close, but a little if we need to get it to the right stickiness. Turn it up a little bit there to get the flour mixed in better. So this will pull away from the sides of the bowl. As you can see, more and more of it is pulling towards the center, until eventually we'll get one sticky ball here. I'm just going to let that run for a couple minutes in order to kind of knead the dough. Again, If you do not have a stand mixer or anything with a dough hook, just knead it by hand on the countertop with flour underneath it. All right, let's resume our kneading for like 2 more minutes. All right, I'm done kneading the dough, so I'm going to just take off my dough hook. And as you can see here, my dough is definitely kind of sticky, but it has all worked into one nice ball of dough, everything pulled away from the sides. If it's still so sticky that it wants to cling to the sides, and just a slight bit more flour would be what you need. So I'm going to actually just use the same bowl, reduced dishes here, and if I just give this a little spray with some cooking spray, this is where I'm going to let my dough rise. Now, most recipes say 30 minutes. I am somebody who finds that I really need more like an hour to get my bread dough to rise to double in size. I like to cover it with just a clean dish towel. You need something over it so your bread dough does not dry out. Saran wrap would work just as well. Places to put this, I could just leave it on the counter, but a warmer place works well. Today is a nice sunny day, so setting it in my window works well. It is a chilly day though. There's this briskness to the air and our fireplace is going, so setting it next to my fireplace works well. If you happen to be running your oven, just setting on the top of your oven where your oven vents kind of put out a little heat is another great place to let your bread dough rise. So I'll see you in probably more like 45 minutes to an hour when we look at our dough. My fireplace is in the process of being replaced and improved, but my dough will still rise nicely next to that nice warm heat. It's been an hour since this dough was set next to the warm fireplace. Let's have a look at it. Oh, look at how much it's risen, and it's just expanded out to the side of the bowls, and it is ready to be made into breadsticks. If you've never made bread before, the next part is the best part. I don't know what there is, but there's just something satisfying about punching down that risen dough. Well, mine has now been flattened a bit, and we are going to turn it into breadsticks. A little flour on the counter is helpful so that it doesn't stick quite as much as we work with this. You can make this into any shapes you wanted to. I'm just going to make some twists today. Sometimes I braid them. You could just make little round dinner rolls if you wanted to as well. I think it kind of helps to separate your dough into some separate pieces, and a lot of times I will keep the ones I'm not working with in my bowl here with that towel back on top just to keep the bread dough from drying out so much. All right, so I have 1/4 of my dough here, and I should be able to make several breadsticks out of this. So I'm going to break it into 4 more pieces, and then I am just going to roll them into long pieces here, rolling them between my hands. And notice I had flour on my hands as well. If you're having trouble with stickiness, spraying your hands with a little cooking spray can help with that as well. So I'm going to make a long twist here. All right. I sometimes like to just braid them back together with a little overlap, 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 so they look something like this. Oops, before I set it on my baking sheet, I'm just going to use one of my cookie sheets. I do want to spray those cookie sheets. All right, I can do a braid like that. We'll do a couple different things with these today. Ooh. I could just kind of give them a twist like this and make some long breadsticks. I could also just make some little dinner rolls out of them as well. Something like that. So I'm just going to continue with all of my pieces of bread, turning them into breadsticks. I think my favorite's always going back to that twist where I just kind of fold them over and twist them together. All right, and on to another piece, and we'll just keep doing this until we have used up all of the bread dough. Here are my bread dough twists, And here are my ones that look just more like a breadstick. Again, make them any shape you want. Notice the spacing. These are going to sit and rise again for another 30 minutes or so. I'm going to cover them again with those towels. I'll need a second one this time and let them, they won't quite double in size, but I want them to rise a little bit. My breadsticks have risen nicely again. They've probably come close to doubling in size. They're definitely a little fatter than they were before. So these are going to go into my oven at 425 degrees. Be sure you have preheated your oven anytime you're baking bread or any kind of pastry or cookies. In 10 to 12 minutes, when these are golden brown, we will take them out of the oven. Nice golden brown. Final step to turn these into garlic parmesan breadsticks is to take some melted butter. I have 2 tablespoons of melted butter and 2 tablespoons of parsley, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic salt or garlic powder. It's up to you, but sometimes like when you have pretzels and you have the salt on the top, the salt is kind of a nice touch. And I have 2 teaspoons of parsley. I'm going to mix my dry spices together, and we will be sprinkling those on top of the bread. While the bread's still warm, I'm going to put the butter on. Little pastry brush works nicely for this, and that butter will just run down the sides there. And if you don't like garlic, leave the garlic out. If you don't like Parmesan, you can leave the Parmesan out of your mixture here. You can even just eat them with a little butter drizzled on the top. All right, a little sprinkle of Parmesan, parsley, and garlic salt over the top of these. Let's give these a taste. Oh, they've just got nice golden color. When I bite into it, it like squishes together, but then those air pockets just show me I have a good bread when it kind of pops back apart. The Parmesan and the garlic salt on top just add a nice flavor to this buttery dinner roll. Perfect choice to go with a soup or a casserole, or anytime you just need a little side dish. Baking bread, it's so much fun.